What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Now that free agency seems to be over for the most part with the New York Giants, maybe they'll make another small move or two. I figured I'd do a video quickly talking about what the New York Giants decided to do in free agency and how I potentially feel it may set them up for the draft based off of what they did in free agency. Because of course, that's what I take out of free agency. What did you do and how could it potentially impact what you plan to do in this year's draft? What holes did you fill going into it? Going into free agency, I said consistently that I wanted the New York Giants to add a premium pass rusher. I did not anticipate that it would be a trade, but I wanted them to add a premium pass rusher. The guy that I constantly talked about was Huff of the New York Jets because I thought it fit the mold of what I thought they would do. I talked about how the New York Giants last year spent more so for what the player could be that was young and upcoming rather than what he already is. And, rather than going like the older route, right? You saw them do that with Bobby Okereke. You saw them do that with Daniel Jones. One worked out, one not so much thus far. So I thought it would be a very similar strategy. They did go that route, but it was via trade. Brian Burns is still very young. We'll talk about that trade and why I like what the New York Giants did with that pick and what it could potentially do for this year's defense. And we'll talk about some of the other things that the New York Giants did in free agency and how it potentially sets us up for the draft. Other things that I wanted them to do was address the offensive line, and they certainly did that in a very big way. Now, did they get the high-end guard that many expected? No. But I think what happened was the guard market was so high that Joe Shane said, okay, I'll try to fill two holes for the same price that it would take to bring in one, being that we have holes all over this offensive line. And once again, at least with the John Runyon Jr. signing, he elected to go with the young route. John Runyon Jr. is still 25 years old, is a guard, known as a good pass protector, not so much in terms of run blocking, but should be a improvement and a guy that hopefully you could build with on this line for a number of years to come. They also brought in Illuminor, but we'll talk about all these guys as we pull it up. It's just easier to organize it. I went on Giants.com just to go over it. Real quick with the Brian Burns thing, I love this pickup. The biggest reason why I wanted them to get an edge was because I wanted them to be able to have the ability to set themselves up for what I think are the strengths of this year's draft class in the first round. And that's the wide receiver and that's the quarterback position. And now I think going into the draft, I think that's what you have to expect the New York Giants are going to do. It's just a matter of which position is it going to be. Do they feel strongly enough about the potential quarterback prospects that will be there? But we'll talk more about that after we get through the free agency holes. Brian Burns, when you really look at this trade, ultimately what it was, you traded Leonard Williams essentially for Brian Burns and a pick swap in the fifth round, and you dropped from 39 to 47, right? Because when you traded Leonard Williams, you ended up getting the 47th pick. We already had the 39th pick, and you got a fifth round pick. The Giants in this trade gave up the 39th pick and a future fifth. I think the same future fifth that they received in that trade for Leonard Williams. So basically the same picks that you acquired when you traded Leonard Williams and a pick swap in the fifth round. So the way I look at this is you drop 8 spots in the second round. You got a much better player at this time in his career. Brian Burns, 25 going on 26. Leonard Williams right around the age of 30. So they got younger. They got a guy who I think has more upside. You're talking about a guy who's going to be 26. He already has 46 sacks. He's been a force since he's been in the league. Last year, didn't have a lot of help on the other side. And you think about what he could do with a guy like Kayvon Thibodeau on the opposite side of him and what he's going to do for Kayvon as well and Dexter Lawrence. And suddenly the Giants have the makings of a team that could have one of the best pass rushes in the NFL. Doesn't mean it'll happen. With our luck, it probably won't in recent years, but they certainly have the potential to be one of the best pass rushes in the NFL. And they're young. I mean, Dexter Lawrence still only 25, 26. Same thing for Burns. Kayvon, of course, a baby. So something you could build with for the next 5, 6 years. And you have to at least I like, the fact that the New York Giants are getting back to their roots. They've always had great pass rushes. And it seems like they're starting to really head back towards that. In addition to that, now you have Azeez Ojulari as a situational pass rusher, provided he can stay healthy. But just a really exciting addition for the New York Giants at an area where they desperately needed help. This one being the second biggest move, this John Runyon. And again, the Giants went with the youth movement route. Again, young, like I said, 25, former 6th-round pick. Ironically, his father was like the New York Giants' biggest rival. If you remember, him and Michael Strand used to go at it all the time when he was a member with the Eagles. But yeah, let's read a little bit up on him. Everything you've heard coming in, Not great in terms of a run blocker, much better as a pass protector. Runyon was a 6th-round pick for the Packers in 2020. He has yet to miss a game, and that's the other common denominator you see with all these moves that the Giants made. They've all had a history, whether it be him, whether it be Singletary, whether it be Burns. They've all had a history of being able to stay on the field. Smart, tough, dependable. After playing all 16 games as a reserve his rookie year, Runyon has started 50 of 51 games across his last 3 seasons. The 6'4", 307-pound lineman started all 17 games at right guard in 2023. He had a 92.4 pass rush win rate, which ranked 9th amongst guards, according to ESPN stats and info. Runyon started all 17 games for the Packers in 2022, and with 11 at right guard and 6 at left. So he's got versatility. He's played both positions. Again, known as a better pass protector than a run blocker, but a huge upgrade for the Giants, and they needed some youth there. So you got to like that pickup. Jalen Mills, not the sexiest of signings. He's 30. I obviously view him as more of a stopgap guy. He's played both corner and safety in his most recent years in the league. He's played the safety position. I still think it's entirely possible when you look at some of the strength that is still left in the corner market. I still think the Giants are going to add somebody, but they're probably waiting for the market to really drop, and they'll probably add another veteran. But the Giants did what they could do there, adding a veteran to what is perceived to be a young group this year, obviously with Dane Belton getting an increased role now that we let go of Xavier McKinney. Once again, the Giants, and I really like this signing, elect to continue to hammer home the offensive line. Something you have to like here, Jermaine Illuminor, who's coming over from the Raiders. Obviously, the tie there is our offensive line coach, Carmen Brasillo, also coming from the Raiders. 6'4", 330 pounds, not as young. I think he's 29, but he's been a solid lineman. I'm not going to call him a superstar. You got him for the price that you did because he's not a superstar, but a guy that is a solid lineman, a guy that has experience with our offensive line coach, and should push Evan Neal this year for sure. And if Evan Neal doesn't get the job done, as a matter of fact, I saw an article on Giants Wire that the Giants have talked to Evan Neal about potentially shifting him to the guard. You have to think Jermaine Illuminor, who has the capability of playing both the tackle and the guard, was a cheaper alternative as opposed to the dude from the Patriots who we could have potentially brought in, Awenu, I believe it's pronounced, who the Patriots ended up keeping. But a similar strategy there, bring in a guy that has guard tackle versatility that could push Evan Neal, and I think that's exactly what Illuminor will do. I don't think Evan Neal is going to get the job handed to him in training camp this year. He'll certainly be starting, but I don't think he's going to get the right tackle job handed to him. He's going to have to outplay Illuminor, and we'll see if he's able to do it. Devin Singletary, obviously the replacement for Saquon Barkley. He's also going to wear 26. He's a hard runner. You know, I've seen him play several times in the league. He is a hard runner. He's small. He's 5'7", 203, but he gets every bit out of that 203-pound frame. I expect the Giants to definitely start to move towards a running back by committee approach, get away from that bell cow strategy like they've had with Saquon Barkley. They're going to try to build through the line. They're going to try to manufacture a ground game that way. Expect to see Gray get more reps this year, and the Giants to potentially draft a running back in day 3 of this year's draft. We'll see how that plays out. I'll probably have a mock draft up either today or tomorrow. Haven't decided yet whether I'll have a running back in the later portion of that draft, but certainly a possibility. I don't view Singletary as a bell cow guy, but certainly a guy that could give you a good 12 to 15 carries a game, and you integrate Gray and potentially a rookie in that backfield as well. Next up, Drew Lock. The Giants, of course, moved on from Tyrod Taylor. Lock now will be the backup. Taylor elected to go with the Jets. Never expected Taylor to be back, especially after they didn't start him last year. It ended up costing him money when they started DeVito. There was a clause in his contract where he missed out on a certain amount of money. So wasn't surprised that he wasn't back. Drew Lock's probably a guy that Dable feels fits his offense well, especially as a backup. Lock probably views the Giants' job as a good opportunity for a backup quarterback with upside who's still young, that if he does get an opportunity to play, he could flourish. Obviously, Dable thought to be a good quarterback guy throughout the league. Lock, the book on him when he was drafted, as you recall, was that he had a big arm. What the Giants did not do well last year was throw the ball down the field. I expect Lock, if he does get an opportunity to play, to be a guy that will certainly take some shots. He may not be very successful doing it over the course of his career, which is why he's a backup, but it makes sense, in terms of a scheme fit and what the New York Giants are looking for out of the quarterback position. Does that rule the Giants out of drafting a quarterback? Absolutely not. And we'll talk more about that after we round up the free agency. McKenzie, depth wide receiver, special teams purposes. That's why you're bringing him in. Obviously, he has ties with the Buffalo Bills, but certainly a guy that can help in specials for the New York Giants, bring some depth at the wide receiver position. Not a guy that's going to make a huge impact. Once again, the Giants continue to hammer it home. They bring in a blocking tight end, formerly from the Philadelphia Eagles, Jack Stoll. He was undrafted out of Nebraska in 2021, 6'4", 247 pounds, but he's known to be more of a blocker. So the Giants really emphasized trying to improve their blocking, whether it was at the tight end spot or the offensive line. Another lineman, the Giants agreed on to terms with Aaron Stinney, I believe it's pronounced, the undrafted out of James Madison. This is for depth. I don't expect him to be a starter. Certainly could push a guy out of the lineup from last year for sure in terms of being a backup, but the Giants really made it a point to get some depth on the offensive line. They also brought in another blocking tight end, Chris Manhertz of the Denver Broncos. And you have to think that the Giants did this at least due in part to the fact that they think Darren Waller may be retiring in the near future. But I think they made it a point to try to improve their blocking as best as they can at that position. And then they brought in another lineman, Austin Schultman, from the Minnesota Vikings. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe they'll say it here, he played some center and guard, if I'm not mistaken. 6'6", 300-pound lineman. Yeah, there you go. I've seen time at center, right guard, and left guard during his NFL career. He has never allowed more than 1 sack in a season, according to Pro Football Focus. He played in 9 games with 3 starts for the Vikings in 23. Schultman started 29 games across 3 seasons at TCU and was named the second team All Big 12 as a junior in 2016. So those were the additions. In terms of the subtractions, obviously Barkley, McKinney, Adoree still not back, hasn't signed on with anybody else. We lose A'Shawn Robinson. And there was a number of other players, obviously, that we're going to lose when you bring in 10 to 15 new players. So we'll see how that plays out. But overall, I love what they did. Joe Schoen continues to show you that he's going to emphasize building up the trenches, whether it be on the offensive line or defensive line. You go back to when he took the job, he drafted Kayvon Thibodeau and Evan Neal, both sides of the line. He extended Dexter Lawrence. He extended Andrew Thomas. Once again, both sides of the line. He traded significant draft capital to bring in Brian Burns. Pass rush. He drafted John Michael Schmitz in the second round. He signed 2 moderately priced guards in this year's free agency class. So he has really made it an emphasis through his first 2 years and change as the New York Giants general manager to try to improve the trenches. Have they been improved enough? Absolutely not. That's why he needs to continue to do it, and I expect him to continue to do it in this year's draft. But you have to figure, after what the New York Giants did in free agency, they have to be setting their sights in the first round if they are not trading down, which is obviously a distinct possibility. But I have to think that it's either going to be a wide receiver or a quarterback. And the question comes, how much do you like these quarterbacks? And everything you've heard, that the Giants have expressed interest. You've seen it all over. There's rumors all over. How much legitimacy to those rumors? Well, we're going to find out, right? If you were Joe Schoen, you don't want anybody to know what you're going to do. So even if you didn't want a quarterback, you would be throwing out flyers that you potentially may, because you want teams to jump up so you can get a better player. Do I think the Giants will explore all options at that position? Absolutely. And what they did in free agency does not change my opinion one way or the other. Signing Drew Lock to a 1-year, $5 million deal should not alter the Giants' opinions of potentially drafting a quarterback if they love one. Question is that opportunity even going to be there? The Chicago Bears, of course, are drafting a quarterback. That now is a fact. It's not even an opinion at this point. But as you know, I've thought that all along. That was obvious. And now that is fact. They traded Justin Fields yesterday for an XFL pick, as far as I'm concerned. I was crazy at the return they got for him. But they're going to go quarterback. Washington's going to go quarterback. I think all signs point to it. They have a pretty good wide receiving core. There's really good quarterbacks in this year's draft class. And I think in the end, New England will more than likely go quarterback. Not a fact. They don't have great weapons. I get all of that. But I just think you got a new coach. You're trying to start over. You could take either Drake May or Jaden Daniels. You're probably going to do it, which leaves the Giants with the J.J. McCarthy option, which you may even have to trade up for at this point, especially being now that we've heard that the Minnesota Vikings traded and acquired, I think it was the 23rd overall pick to go in addition with their 11th pick. So you have to think that the Vikings did that, knowing full well that if a quarterback that they like is available at a certain spot, they are going to use that to trade up. I would think. It's not a fact, but you have to think that at least. So we'll see. I don't even know if a trade-up opportunity is going to be there for the New York Giants, right? There could already be a deal in place if J.J. McCarthy is available at 4 or if Jaden Daniels is available at 4, whoever that team may like. So if you're asking me right now if I was a betting man, I think the same thing I did going into free agency that the New York Giants will more than likely go with a wide receiver if they don't trade down. And that wide receiver you have to think is either going to be Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze. And then after that, you say to yourself, well, what do they do going forward? Well, of course, they traded the 39th overall pick to get in Brian Burns, which I love the trade, but it gives you a little bit less ammunition to potentially trade up into the back end of the first round, like some people anticipated they may, if a quarterback they may like falls down. So I think they're going to go BPA throughout the course of this draft. I don't think they will force any picks, but a quarterback is certainly a possibility. It depends if there is one there that they like, whether it be at pick 49 or 47 or wherever they're picking, or pick 6. It's certainly a possibility. But you got to think going into the draft, their biggest needs after free agency is corner, safety, excluding the quarterback, which is obviously a potential need. Corner, safety, wide receiver. That's what I'm looking at going in terms of the biggest need. With more depth needed at the linebacker spot, you could always use more pass rushers. You could always use more help on the offensive line. But what they did in free agency, I think, set themselves up to try to improve the wide receiving core, potentially get a quarterback, and improve that secondary as best as they can in this year's draft. But I think Shane will go BPA. I don't think he's going to force any picks just out of need. And right now, if you ask me, I think they're going to go wide receiver with that pick. But I won't rule J.J. McCarthy out. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.